Hey Andreas, the
Hi Peter.
the last couple of decades.
Opnieuw.
With the last couple of decades, we saw almost all companies moving to the cloud, and now maybe the last couple of years we see a counter movement coming in. How do you feel about it?
It's actually a thing that has been going on for quite a time already. I think Dropbox was the first public example of a company that moves everything out of the cloud back into their own hardware because of cost reasons mainly. If I recall it correctly, they're now back on Amazon S3 because there is now Glacier, I think, on Amazon. And of course, there is a very public example as well from Basecamp that did this already, I think, twice as well.
Yeah.
I think what you need to keep in mind when looking at these examples is that those are companies that have the scale and the amount of people to do this. I think for a startup or a scale-up, it rarely makes sense to do that because you can simply not pull it off.
Yeah. In the audits that we see startups sometimes coming with a huge infrastructure setup. It seems like a bit they took the documentation of the cloud provider and followed it by heart. My feeling there is that sometimes it's overcomplicated for a startup, and sometimes a simple VM could suffice. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how we approach most projects as well. I think if you have scaling issues on your infrastructure, it's a good problem to have, and you can solve it when the problem is there. And I think as engineers, we always try to make things complicated, and we try to use the latest technology, which is nice, obviously, but it also makes it very complex and sometimes also overwhelming for you people, for example, joining a team. So unless you need a lot of different services and have a very complex application structure, I think you should be able to really put everything on a couple of single machines. I think that the problem that people have with moving out of a cloud provider is that they don't really understand the complexity that a cloud provider takes away. For example, in terms of redundancy of network and scaling and the easiness of, for example, I want to have more memory on my machine. I can just put it in a switch somewhere and the box is rebuilding. While of course, if you go with your own hardware or maybe VPS if you want, it's not so easy to make those kind of changes. And you might even, if you have your own hardware, you need to be able to go to the data center as well to fix things and stuff like that. So I think it's very easy said, but it's very hard to do to really move out of a cloud environment. Of course, we need to define a bit like what is cloud. I think every provider is part of the cloud these days. I guess it's really about, choosing the right provider, not locking yourself too much into what they're providing in terms of services. So I think it makes sense to read what they say, this is the best way to do it on our platform, but not lock yourself too much into that. And again, I think it's very hard to really roll it fully on your own.
Yeah, makes sense actually. And I agree, having your own hardware is not a good path to take as a startup.
Definitely.